welcome everybody to the Homeless Services Task Force meeting for July 1st. Here we are, halfway through the year. We're not going to go around doing introductions because it's a little painful in the virtual environment. But I see we have most of our normal people here, so thank you all for attending. I'm going to reorder the agenda slightly to accommodate Ashley O with the LA County CEO's office. So the first thing I just need to do is there are meeting minutes from May 6th, and we just need to receive and file those. So if anybody has any changes to those meeting notes, please speak now or forever hold your peace.
And just so you know, they are posted on the Homeless Services Task Force webpage on the COG website. Okay,
and I'm not seeing anybody, so so we're just going to assume that they are good. So Jackie, you can finalize those, and then everybody just be aware that in your chat area, David and Grace are putting in files there, so you can grab those and download them for yourselves. And again, as we have done in the past in this virtual environment, if you do have a question, please just open up your participants window and then click raise hand. And if there's a question, I can just simply call on you. If for some reason I don't see the raised hand in the participants area, just
Did I lose everybody?
No, we're all here, Jackie. Just wave madly at the camera, and hopefully I will see you from that perspective. All right. So with that said, we're going to actually start today off with an update from Ashley O regarding Measure 8's draft recommendations, which were just released, and they just had a discussion on for the past hour and a half. So Ashley, I saw that you were on the line. Why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Christian. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm really sorry. I'm having some technical issues. How do I reduce the size of the screen? It's full screen now.
It's full screen. Are you on a Mac or a PC?
I'm on a PC. I'm so sorry. Yeah, all of a sudden it just did it on its own.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not a PC guy. I'm a Mac guy. So if anybody has any input on,
I got it.
Oh, you got it.
I got it. Hi, you guys. Thank you so much for accommodating me. There's actually a concurrent session happening with the city managers whose cities are hosting the Project Room Key site. So I apologize and thank you, LASA and our COG partners for sort of switching around the order. As the chairperson has shared, the county had released the proposed Measure H budget last Thursday, and today we just finished a public web meeting on the session, and the document that you're seeing on the screen right now will be uploaded on the Homeless Initiative website. So I'd like to just go through it very briefly, and then to make sure that we have some time set aside towards the end to have address any questions. Thank you, Grace. So pretty much as you guys know, since last fall and winter, we have engaged our community widely, involving numerous stakeholders, including the cities and COGs, to provide their insight on shaping the budget for Measure H fiscal year 2021. There were 8 policy summits that were convened, as well as LASA, who also convened community sessions in all of the spas. And that process ended on November 30th. And then that also resulted in the baseline of the recommended budget, where the county departments got together and we have come up with some funding proposals for the next upcoming fiscal year. Next slide. You will see, by going on the links that's included on these slides, you'll be able to view the community feedback that we have received during the input sessions, as well as the public comments, okay? In terms of what you could expect is that right now, as the Homeless Initiative has released the draft funding recommendations, it really kicked off the public process, which will also include a public hearing, as well as public comments that could be submitted online, which will close on July 15th. And then afterwards, Homeless Initiative will release the revised updated budget on August 10th, followed by the homelessness policy deputies who will meet on August 13th to discuss the recommended budget, and then ultimately for final board deliberation on September 15th. Okay. I think just to tee up before I take a deeper dive into the Measure H funded strategies, I'd like to provide some general comments, including the fact that we are in the midst of a global pandemic, which all of you guys are feeling and have been feeling since this year, which has really affected our economic activity. And a direct result of that has been a significant reduction of the Measure H sales tax revenue. We are anticipating that compared to what we projected last year, that there will be a reduction of $71 million in the revenue loss, which represents a 20% reduction from our original funding projection. Our priority here is to avoid any unnecessary curtailments while stabilizing the system by really funding the core elements, as well as to really tap into various funding sources and a creative patchwork so that we don't have to unnecessarily discontinue or terminate funding. So we have some bridge funding that we have utilized to make sure that we could sustain a certain level of services of those what's funded by Measure H, and including, of course, the CARES Act ESG funding. And also, as we know, we'll need to see how it pans out, but then within the state budget, there is $300 million that will be allocated as part of the HAP allocation. And we're expecting about 100 million of that to come to LA County, which includes county, city of LA, and of course, our COC, LASA. And also that we've also taken a number of steps to mitigate impact of the drop of the revenue by tapping into non-Measure H funding. And also we are seeking to access 18.5% of the Federal CARES Act ESG funding that is allocated by the federal government to support the homeless services. And that $18.5 million represents $60 million that we're hoping to work with 6 other cities that get their own ESG funding. And those cities include, of course, City of LA, who has the lion's share, as well as Long Beach, Pomona, El Monte, Glendale, and Pasadena. County intends to use its ESG funding to support the unincorporated areas and, of course, the 82 cities. At the end of the day, we believe that the $60 million that we hope to pull together by collaborating with the 6 cities, and they're very interested, even though we haven't come to an agreement yet, that's also going to help us to mitigate the anticipated budget reduction in our recommended Measure H budget. Ultimately, what you're going to see as I begin each strategy is that we are going to be using HAP, HEAP, or Measure H funding to sustain our core program services for the first 4 months in hopes that ESG could kick in and sustain the remainder of the strategies from November to June. Okay, next slide. And I think I just would like to say that this recommended budget, it was not an easy process. In fact, it was a very painful process to get this point. And we, again, just really hope that we're able to sustain our core components, including outreach, interim housing, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing. So starting with strategy A1 and A5, those are the prevention strategies targeting the families and, of course, the individuals. For A1, our goal is to fund first 4 months of the prevention program for the families by tapping into Measure H. And the remaining months between November and June, it will depend on how we're able to collaborate with 6 other cities who are getting their ESG CARES Act funding to be able to use that pooled money to be able to keep this strategy whole. And there's a second component to A1 DCFS on the next slide. And this is going to support a prevention and aftercare program, which is a pilot, and it's going to provide financial assistance to families who are referred to the Department of Children and Family Services who do not have an open case and who have unstable housing. The next slide will actually tell you, show you a comparison between previous fiscal year that ended yesterday and new fiscal year that started today. So you're going to see that it's $500,000 to support the DCFS portion, targeting the families at 500 grand. Next slide is for A5. It's a prevention program for the individuals. For the interest of time, I think when you guys visit our website, you guys could take a look at the description and of course the status, which talks about number of people served. When we go to our next slide, it's similar to strategy A1 that we're targeting individuals who are adults without dependent minors. We are recommending, similar to what we did for A1, $3.8 million for the first 4 months in hopes that the ESG CARES Act funding could kick in to be able to sustain this strategy for the remaining 8 months. On to this is another component which is being administered as part of A5 by the Children, Family Services, and Health Services for a total of $1.8 million. $1.5 million will be utilized by Health Services to establish a homelessness prevention unit targeting the most at-risk individuals who will become homeless based on the predictive analysis, as well as additional $300,000 for the transitional age youth who will be receiving services via Supervised Independent Living Program, SILP. Our next strategy is B1, administered by Public Social Services. And this is a rental subsidies for the disabled, homeless, general relief participants applying for SSI. Our hope is that if you go to the next slide, that there is a reduction in Measure H funding. Luckily, DPSS is able to sustain the program for the entire fiscal year 2021 as a result of one-time funding available to the department. Next slide is B3, which is again one of our core components, rapid rehousing. What's going to happen is that it's actually one of our Measure H funded strategies that's receiving a significant amount of the tax revenue. And we are hoping that if you go to the next slide, that we are hoping that we could potentially fund the remaining part of the strategy if the $60 million that'll be pulled from the 6 cities by using their CARES Act ESG funding. If we could secure that, then we will be able to free up a portion of the Measure H funding to support other strategies that are at risk of being reduced or being terminated. So this is one of the strategies that we flagged. On top of the $9.5 million of the HAP funding, we're really counting on ESG funding to kick in. And then also, as we know, rapid rehousing, we really do target low acuity people who could quickly be assisted to transition into more stable housing. So for B4, which is the utilization of federal housing subsidies, this is one of the strategies, and of course we all know that these are a lot of the incentive programs to encourage the landlords to accept subsidized tenants. including damage mitigation, holding costs, security deposits, and counseling and retention, and everything else. For the next slide, I'd like to flag that this is one of the strategies that cannot directly be funded with the CARES Act ESG. So, so far we have identified Measure H funding to support the 4 months of the program implementation. And this is also yet another strategy we're hoping to be able to maintain as we work with 6 other cities who are receiving their CARES Act ESG funding, which will free up Measure H funding. For B6 is the Family Reunification Housing Funds. And it provides rapid rehousing as well as case management services to families in the child welfare system. And the goal is to unify them by providing them a suitable and stable housing. If you go to the next slide. So this funding, it's not going to be allocated any Measure H funding for fiscal year 2021. However, DCFS, Children and Family Services, indicated that they will be able to sustain funding for this strategy by reinvesting savings generated by this strategy. Because ultimately, as we unite families, it means that there is reduction in the homeless population, which means that generates program savings. B7 is a interim housing for those exiting institutions, whether it's jails, hospitals, or the foster care. And if you go to the next slide, there is a slight increase in this year's recommended funding. It's going to maintain current beds, but it addresses some funding gap for the increase in rates. If we go to C456, this is countywide SSI, SSDI, and Veterans Benefits Advocacy for the disabled individuals who are homeless or at risk of becoming homelessness. And it really helps them to secure their entitled benefits as well as to assist with securing housing. If you go to next slide, what you're going to see is that there is some reduction, and that reduction is as a result of program restructuring, which will involve some centralization of some parts of the programs that's going to achieve cost efficiency, thus no service reductions. For C7, this is employment opportunities for the homeless adults. If we go to next page. This is another program where we are recommending 4 months in Measure H funding from July to October. And the remaining 8 months will be directly dependent on county and 6 cities cooperation to be able to pull $60 million together of its ESG funding, which is about 18.5% of our respective ESG buckets, so that we could sustain this strategy. For D2 Jail and Reach, next slide. So this is to provide case management as well as housing services for those who are incarcerated, but those who are being discharged so that they don't discharge into homelessness. And if you go to next slide. So we are recommending a small portion, again, representing first 4 months with Measure H. And again, this is another strategy where it will depend on the 7 entities cooperation to pull their ESG funding together. So for D6 is the Criminal Records Act. And it's the same thing if you go to next slide. And it's the records expungement, which hinders our clients' ability to secure housing and jobs and everything else. The same principle here, Measure H funded first 4 months and remaining 8 months dependent on the ESG coordinated efforts. For D7 is one of our core components, permanent supportive housing. And it includes not just rental subsidy, but as well as intensive case management services, mental health services, and substance use disorder services. If you go to the next slide, you're going to see the continued funding at $58 million. And also there will be a supplemental funding coming from the county's HAP funding. This also includes the new units that came live last year. So which means that those costs now need to be fully annualized, as well as the new units, whether it's project-based or tenant-based, that will be opening this fiscal year. I like to open, if you go back, originally you guys, when the county received our HAP funding as part of last year's state allocation, we were hoping to spread that over 2 fiscal years, this fiscal year and next fiscal year. But due to the significant reduction in Measure H revenue, we will be using the entire allocation to be able to preserve services, and we'll be using the entire allocation for this fiscal year, you guys. Let's go to E6. So this is expanded countywide outreach system, and it's the multidisciplinary team that consists of mental health clinicians, nursing, substance use disorder clinicians, as well as peer and of course housing social workers as well, the case managers. If you go to the next slide, what you're going to see is that there is increase in funding compared to last year. However, it's going to pretty much maintain the current outreach workers, but there will be an elimination of the public space generalist teams, one from each SPA, and those are usually 2 generalists from each MDT teams. And we're also hoping to sustain the 4 public health nurses who were added last September, so that they could really be proactively involved in outreaching and serving the large encampments where we have a large volume of homeless population. I'd like to note that this funding recommendation excludes funding for the Safe Storage Program, which was formally added in September of 2019. At this time, no safe storage sites have been identified or established as of now. The E7 is the coordinated entry system, which includes a variety of services, whether it's rep pay program, housing navigation, housing location, regional coordination, and our lead agency is LASA. If you go to the next slide, you're going to see a significant dip in the Measure H funding. However, we plan to supplement it with counties' HEAP funding, LASA's HAP and HEAP funding to be able to maintain as much services as possible. However, there will be a funding reduction or elimination for the following services. Regional coordination will go from 8.7 million to 6.6 million. Technical assistance to the community-based organizations will be eliminated. The rep pay program will be eliminated, and the reason is because it's going to be centralized under strategy C7 as administered by DHS. A small portion of the training program will be reduced, 100,000 out of $1.2 million, and the training is really targeting the service providers. The legal services will be reduced by about 50%, 3 million to 1.5 million, and there will be a $1 million reduction in housing navigation services. If we go to strategy EA, it's a huge, another core component. It targets, let's go to another slide. We're going forward. Thank you. And one more. There we go. This is our interim housing, which includes crisis, winter, as well as bridge, recuperative care beds, and stabilization beds. If we go to the next slide, you're going to see an increase in Measure H funding recommendation, as well as other sources of funding to supplement it, including county HAP funding. This is to operate existing number of interim housing beds, as well as it also represents a fully annualized cost of the new interim housing beds that went live past fiscal year. E14 is an array of services targeting our transition age youth, including access centers, housing, case management, family reconnection, and education liaisons to directly serve our TAY population. And if you go to next slide, there is a slight dip in the funding for Measure H. However, we will be supplementing it with the county HAP funding. So it actually represents a slight increase compared to last year's budget. Next slide, please. F7 is a preservation and promotion of the development of affordable housing for homeless population. If you go to next slide. There is no recommended funding for this year because last year's funding was a one-time funding. And then there is a funding set aside for Central Measure H administration. And the increase represents 5 new positions that were related to be able to manage contract related staffing and costs. Next slide. I think this is also really important to mention that even on top of all the recommendations that I have shared with you guys, we will need to make an additional $25 million curtailment in November 2020. Keep in mind that's 4 months after Measure H carries through, those strategies. If we are not able to secure adequate amount of ESG CARES Act funding. The county will allocate, pending the status of the 7-entity collaboration, to pull 18.5% of our CARES Act ESG funding together. At the end of the day, county will allocate county's portion of CARES Act ESG funding to free up Measure H funding to avoid this curtailment in the unincorporated areas in 82 cities for which the county receives ESG funding for, and that we are responsible for. All 5 board offices, as well as the county, we are communicating and coordinating and strategizing with 6 other cities that receive their own ESG funding. And our collective goal is to pull our funds together to free up Measure H funding to avoid this curtailment. Next slide. This is the planned timeline in terms of our budget planning process. As I've shared with you, this month is going to be a heavy public comments month and engagement month, including release of the budget last week, web meeting today, as well as various presentations at various COGs. You guys are actually the first one, as well as public hearing on July 15th and public comments. And then again, August 13th, board deputies, September 15th, final board deliberation. Next slide. And then this is for any questions and comments that you will have. And through Grace, I could provide a link to our website where this presentation would be uploaded in. I'm not sure if it's been uploaded yet. Last time I checked at 3 p.m. it wasn't, but I'll make sure that you guys also get the link to this document as well. That concludes my presentation. I know that it was fast and furious, but I'd love to take a moment to answer any questions or comments that you guys may have.
Okay. Somebody has questions, actually just raise your hand and I can call on you. Well, Ashley, they were so riveted that they're silent. Okay, Ashley, if anybody has questions or after they have a little bit more time to digest all this, can they send questions directly to you or to your office?
Absolutely, absolutely. And Christian, what I'd like to add is that Strategy E7 maintains the regional coordination funding for all the COGs. And And pending the, of course, Measure H availability, the county has committed that for the entire duration of Measure H. And also, we do not have the implementation funding and innovation funding included in E7. And the reason is because those will be sunsetting June 30th of 2021, which means, and the money is already accounted for. So we're not, we have not factored in any reductions for those two types of funding. And for sure, if you guys have any follow-up questions or any concerns or suggestions, I would definitely welcome that with open arms, you guys.
Okay.
I see someone
George.
in Torrance raising their hand
Yes.
in front of George.
Go ahead, George.
Councilman Matucci, we're sharing the same screen, had a question, so
Hi.
I raised it for him.
Okay.
Thank you. I just had a question about the allocation of funds. You know, Torrance being one of the larger cities, maybe the largest city in the South Bay, and possibly the one that has, I mean, other than San Pedro area, Wilmington, but Torrance seems to have quite a bit of the homeless population just because of our vast area that we cover. How are we going to allocate some of the money within the South Bay? And also, if there's anything that the South Bay COG is doing to put together some ordinances that would help, or suggestions on ordinances that would help cities give some flexibility to be able to, I hate to use the word push, but highly encourage people into treatment, because as we well know, drug addiction, alcoholism, and mental illness is something that is a big concern and probably one of the biggest contributing factors to people staying on the streets. So just want to find out if there's anything that we're planning as a whole to help achieve getting people off the streets and into programs to help them.
Sure thing. So I think I heard two questions. One is in regards to the homeless counts and allocation, which I'm sure Lassa will get into after me. And then secondly, in terms of how we could effectively engage the homeless population in order to be able to receive the treatment services that they need, whether it's mental health services or substance use disorder, if not both. So having said that, I think we need to brace ourselves, you guys, for the homeless count release. I'm concerned with the change in Spot 8. And I think it's gonna create a huge aha moment for the entire group as we have experienced a significant spike. I'm not really sure how that translates to different cities in Spot 8, because I believe it's gonna take a little more time for Lassa to release city level information. Those usually come after the countywide information. So having said that, council member, funding is oftentimes driven by, of course, some specific programs, but really it is influenced by the total homeless counts on a regional level. So for example, Spot 8 gets the allocation for the homeless count that it has. And then also there are some other programs that's not dictated by their homeless count. So for example, there are only certain areas that have interim housing sites or permanent supportive housing sites, even though we like to spread that throughout the county, right, for geographic access and equity. So strategies like that are not dictated or prescribed by the homeless counts. So having said that, in terms of Torrance, it would be interesting to see what the new count is. But ultimately, it's a regionally driven funding where there are core community coordinated entry system providers that provide services regionally. And also cities could maximize those resources also by coordinating closely with the service providers in Lhasa, because you guys know your homeless constituents better than anyone else. So, and you guys already have rapport with them. So that if we could also partner together to engage them and to be able to seek the services that they need in hopes to expedite them securing and transitioning into more stable housing, I think that would really be a key thing. In terms of the people who resist mental health services and substance use disorder services. Unfortunately, there is a fine line between them having their free will, right? And we can't technically force them into services, right? What, unless they're at risk of like endangering themselves or others. I think what we're trying to do is we are really trying to go at it at this time because our opportunities are unfortunately very limited. How we could, again, take a multi-pronged approach, whether it's the city's law enforcement or whether it's the service provider or county service provider or even community-based outreach efforts where we could constantly engage them in hopes that they would agree to receive these services. Because at the end of the day, we cannot force them. But I think what we should also emphasize is the fact that we are expanding the mental health and substance use disorder capacity in order to make sure that we have enough capacity for those who are ready and willing to receive these services. So the second question, I don't think it really addressed your question adequately. Unfortunately, we cannot force them into treatment facilities.
Maybe I'll make a comment here.
Yes.
Actually, this is Councilman Chen. I think I see Viet on the system here because I asked Viet Hong from the city staff last night to give us a little update because you probably are aware from the COG point of view, the city of Torrance is just beginning to initiate effort to generate a homeless plan, I believe.
Yes.
So I believe that's the first step to start getting more funding. I think we requested funding from La Savia de COG, I think that's how that goes, to generate the homeless plan. And from there, we may be able to synergize some activities, other cities in the COG on how to address the homeless situation. So in my understanding, we're just in the beginning steps of trying to do this. And then the next step would be what kind of potential solutions could help. A lot of times we get stuck in this position where when it's substance abuse that causes eventually into what we think mental illness. Because I think even with the Zoom we had Monday with that special one about policing, it seems like that's an area where it's a tough nut to crack. How do we provide help for people who don't think they're ill and just want to stay that way? I don't know if we generate a homeless task plan, we could even, how do we even start addressing those particular cases yet?
Councilmember Chen, I was actually excited that Torrance was applying for homelessness planning grant through the COG's innovation funding, which was a direct funding from the county to the COGs in our county. And I'm also actually really excited because when the cities did this a little over 2 years ago, a lot of them were new in the game, and the plans that were developed, it wasn't really action-oriented with deliverables and timeline. So I know that Torrance is really looking into providing a 202 version of the homelessness plan, given that we have 2-3 years under our belt. And LASA and the county is very interested in supporting Torrance as you guys develop the plan, which will also be ready for implementation. So we're really excited for that. I'd like to go back to what Councilmember Medici was saying in terms of the ordinances. As part of the COG's innovation funding, and they have received about $800,000 for the entire South Bay Cities COG. And I know that cities have been very much involved in the planning process to be able to see how they could strategically be allocated. And one of the items the COG is exploring is the review of the ordinances for interim housing and permanent supportive housing. I think it's going to be very telling after LASA presents their homelessness count. at the end of the day, we could do all the outreach, all the navigation, all the services that we want, targeting our homeless constituents in the South Bay COG cities. Unless they have housing they could go to, we're not going to fix the problem. And so COG is actually proposing to allocate a small amount to be able to assess the current state of the ordinances in all the cities in hopes that we could work together to be able to identify potential interim housing and permanent supportive housing sites. So that's going to also happen. And another thing that we've also talked about is we do not want to create a domino effect where one city, for example, adopts an anti-camping or anti-RV ordinance, and that just ends up shifting that city's homeless constituent to another city who may not have passed that ordinance. So that's something that we really want to avoid. So, and that's why this innovation funding is going to be so critical to really encourage and mobilize the cities to work together so that we're not shifting one problem to another jurisdiction, but we could really work together and see what we could do. There's going to be one city who could provide or who could participate in 3, 4, 5 solutions. And then there's going to be one city who could only participate in one solution. But we want to make sure that every single city in South Bay COG is able to at least participate in at least one strategy. Because at the end of the day, we have different political drivers, challenges, and opportunities. But that's really the intent of the innovation funding that COG is really spearheading in partnership with the county and the cities. So also wanted to sort of put in that plug since council member mentioned the ordinance piece.
Thank you, Ashley, because
Oh, you're welcome.
It's always important to reiterate that if we're all rowing in the same direction, we're going to accomplish more. And as Councilmember Buscagliano has said many times, in this meeting, we need about 2,500 to 3,000 housing units here just in the South Bay in Spot 8. So we all need to do our part. We can't just expect San Pedro to pull all the weight for us. If there are no other questions, I would like to move on because we're at 3:45 and we do have a full agenda here. So are there any other questions for Ashley at this time? Okay, seeing none, if you do come up with any, I realize that, everything she shared today was a lot to soak in. Take that back to your staffs and please feel free to reach out to Ashley and her staff if you have any questions. The public commenting period goes through July 15th and you saw the schedule there. So please make sure that you weigh in on anything that you feel is important on behalf of your municipality or the COG in general. Thank you so much, Ashley.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on now to Lassa's presentation. So Clementina, I see you are on there somewhere. There you are.
Good afternoon, everyone. Actually, if you wouldn't mind, we can focus on the SPA 8 data summary. I'm actually going to do key takeaways first. I'll go over the overall results, and then I'll focus on Service Planning Area 8, and then I'll give some key dates that I think are important about extra data that's being available. So I think one of the biggest things is that, as we all know, this whole situation with the pandemic, over the last 5 years, our homeless delivery system has vastly increased its performance and its effectiveness. We've housed double the number of people each year than before we had Measure H funding. But I think in response to COVID-19, we are making even a more improvement, moving faster. We were able to shelter over 6,000 people in 3 months. And, the whole goal of bringing in the 15,000 most vulnerable people experiencing homelessness inside is a big task that the whole community and everybody and all our partners are working to strive to. I think the biggest struggle that we all have is the fact that despite our success in ending homelessness for those tens of thousands each year, the number of people who keep falling into homelessness each year also continues to grow. So this is the inflow, the number of people who are falling into homelessness. With the economic fallout of the pandemic, the systemic racism, which has led to 4 times the overrepresentation of Black people among those experiencing homelessness, it is clear that we need a big system changes in our housing supply, economy, healthcare, justice systems, and more to advance racial justice, and then to stem the inflow of homelessness. LASA continues to work with our partners in the community to try to address this. The biggest thing, with the homeless count is that it did happen in January, and I think we have to think about, where we were then and where we are now. And I think the biggest thing is that when that happened, when we did our census, the results basically is telling us that it's still unacceptably high. The LA County went up 13% to over 66,000 people. In the city of LA, it went up over 14% to over 41,000 individuals. And I think that's the biggest thing to keep in mind is that we still have a huge number of individuals who are unsheltered. In the SPA 8 area, one of the biggest things was that, you did see a 3% increase. This particular data summary is for SPA 8, but does not include the city of Long Beach. So it's basically SPA 8 without the city of Long Beach. Long Beach is not part of what we call the LA Continuum of Care. And so those numbers are not included as they do different methods to getting their data results. And so we can't just add them on. So there was a 3% increase from last year. Of the 4560 individuals who are homeless, majority of them are individuals, 81% of them, and 25 and older. 19% are family members. 9% are veterans. 45% are people experiencing chronic homelessness. On health and disability, 35% have a substance use disorder, 20% have a serious mental illness, and 24% have physical disability. When we were looking at race, ethnicity, basically in the SPA 8 area, majority are white, then goes to Hispanic, Latinos, and then Black, African American population. When we were looking at our domestic violence survivors and intimate partner violence, 29% of the individuals stated that they had suffered that. 9% actually stated that they were homeless due to fleeing domestic violence and intimate partner violence. When we did our homeless census, there were a couple of question changes that I wanted to bring to your attention, just because it did make an impact on the results. In particular, it was for substance abuse. And one of the things that we try to do every single year really is talk to the people that conduct the interview, so the surveyors, but also the people that respond. And we use our boards for lived experience to really go over the questions. And one of the things that was brought up for this particular year was how we were asking questions on the health conditions. In particular, in 2020, respondents were asked in the past, if they had problematic drug or alcohol use. And so it seemed like you were blaming the individual that you were interviewing, that you have a problem with substance abuse, you have a problem with alcohol use. And so we try, based on the feedback from the community, the question was then changed to if you had difficulties with drug or alcohol use. And so people, the result was that people were a little bit more, felt less criticized, and felt more confident responding to those questions. It also, the way we asked the question, after the health conditions, we had asked if this was a permanent or long-term but it was an option for just everything. What we did this year was that we wanted to know for each of those health conditions, was it a permanent and long-term issue? And so it also basically gave us a better picture of each of those health conditions. How long-term was it? And so it captured data a little bit better than we had captured before. So I think that's, two big things that I wanted to address that people might not have known, that we definitely want to make sure that people understand that being able to ask questions in a certain way and having the ability to get people to feel comfortable in sharing their experience is one of the big things that we really did focus on this year, and it did make an impact. I know there were questions about extra data releases happening. And so one of them is that the council districts for the city of LA and then the county of LA Super district data will be released until July 8th. We also have the independent cities and local communities meeting this Monday. And basically this is where we're going to be going over the methodology, reviewing the data summary and data dashboard for all the 85 cities within the County of Los Angeles. We'll go over communication toolkit to help people respond to questions from their constituents, as also from the council member boards. I think this is one of the things that as LASA can try to do is improve how cities communicate the results and also feel confident in what they're sharing with their boards. And lastly, basically after that meeting on Monday, independent cities are going to have 2 weeks to review the data, make sure that they feel comfortable with it. We're going to have office hours so that the cities can ask us questions. And then within those 2 weeks after that, we are going to release the data publicly. And so allowing the cities to really get it really involved with their data and feel comfortable what they are going to be releasing. And finally, the youth count results, we're targeting that to be towards the end of July. I will stop there because I did share a lot of information and I'm sure there's a lot of questions. So I'm open to any questions.
Great. I'm going to start off just real quick. So when the final, these aren't the final numbers quite yet? Is that?
So we have more data releases that are happening. So the SPA 8 is for the whole South Bay area, but all the cities within the County of Los Angeles, so your Torrance and Pedro area, all those different are going to be released towards the middle, like July 20th for those locations.
Okay, so for the electeds on, then sometime towards the end of the month, you'll get to see the breakdowns for each of the
Correct, exactly, yeah.
Okay, all right. And thank you for explaining the high percentage uptick on the mental illness stuff, because I think that's helpful to know that as you guys improve the whole CES system and the questions that are being asked, that we're actually getting more and more data that's helpful to us and the providers out there.
Correct.
Are there any other questions for Clementina? Okay, well, thank you so much, Clementina. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate all of you and all the work that you do.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to move to our next item, which is a post-COVID-19 recovery plan. And John LaRock, I see you here. I don't see Lieutenant Widman, but John, if you want to get going, by all means.
Thank you, Councilmember Horvath. Good afternoon, everybody. John LaRock, City of Redondo Beach. Apologies for Wayne Winman. He is not able to attend this meeting. Wayne is a member of the RHAC, which is the Regional Homeless Advisory Council. That body has, in partnership with LASA, developed this document. I have not consulted with Wayne a great deal on the formation of this document, so I'm sort of reading it as you read it, but I'm happy to guide our discussion, or at least our review of this document. This is an extremely high-level look at what is the post-Project Room Key effort managed by LASA. It also, I will note, doesn't specifically take into account the governor's Project Home Key initiative, which was just recently announced with new funding in the state budget. That being said, in the context of what cities' role can be document and in this plan is really what I'll skim over today, and then feedback to the committee on this document and any ideas that you have about what city's role could be, if any, in this can be sent back to Grace at the COG, Lori at the COG, and then they can get that to the folks at LASA. So you see here the discussion overview in terms of the document's guidance. Really nothing new here, so we can move to the next slide. The guiding principles here are really what is the goal of their process, is to make sure that all of the individuals in our county, which is about, I think, just under 4,500, if I'm not mistaken, that those people do not return to the streets once the room key or home key projects end. And as you heard from Ashley previously, that might be an indeterminate date just based on new funding that's being applied to that project. And they have a goal to move past the current 4,500 or so to get to 15,000, which obviously is ambitious, both from a property acquisition and agreement process, but also in terms of finding what would be rapid rehousing eligible clients to move in within a short period of time. Nonetheless, it is the goal. They've got the inflow is a big topic here, because obviously the longer the economic toll of COVID-19 continues, there is a great probability of new homeless, which would obviously be more eligible for rapid rehousing, but still would be a community of people that would need to be addressed in terms of room key and home key. Future crises, whether that's second wave, third wave, or other type of economic or other catastrophe, the infrastructure that's being set up now, the skill sets that's being developed now, how can that be codified, improved, and essentially made toolkit ready for the next time this type of deployment is needed? And then obviously, and certainly not last but least, is the racial equity lens, to make sure that our multiply diverse populations in the county and in our SPA, it varies city by city, area by area, making sure that there is equity in addressing all types of communities experiencing homelessness, regardless of any type of demographic subset. Next slide, please. You see here the recovery command structure. Really, the advisory council has really driven this. You see them there next to the LASA leadership. I think what's missing here is to see state and county above cities. So that's feedback I would provide. I think that's very important. Lived experience, obviously, as you know, are folks experiencing homelessness or who have just come out of homelessness and are now housed happily, and so forth. Many of us as cities work with providers. We work with outside funders. So there's a lot of familiarity there. So really it's to see where the city's role in this flow chart likely falls on perhaps the acquisition master lease side. And then obviously in our partnerships with outreach providers, and also certainly in research and evaluation, making our homeless data and sharing that, and certainly our best practices being shared with each other in the COG, so that everybody has the same toolkit available. Next slide. This is a breakdown of health and economic recovery framework. Some of the terms I think are a little bit not naive, but certainly inaccurate at this point, just based on what's happening now and what is projected to be happening and so forth. So there's a lot of mention here about economic recovery. As many of you know, being elected officials or managers of cities, economic recovery is projected to be a 2 to 6 year process, if not more. So the conditions of the immediate and short-term action could be protracted for some time, and then the other terms might need to fall into place subsequent, but you see kind of the pillars of response that are dealt with on a slide-by-side basis when we get to it. The equity and prepare for future crises, you see there in longer term. That's, you know, equity I think should be a short-term action, as mentioned on the goal slide. Preparing for future crises obviously will be a longer-term goal, but I do think those should be separated. Next slide, please. So here, the rehousing recovery strategy. This again does not take into account the project home key that the state is identified with, I think, $1 billion in funding. I'm not aware of if they've broken that funding down to a county, a SPA, or a state level. Anybody jump in who might know that information at this point? It's fairly new news, so that may not be available just yet, but it is part of the approved state budget. So hopefully that does add more to the funding conversation that Ashley reviewed. But in any event, this is really the flow chart to move people from the room key residency, whatever term that's going to have, and get them into more either rapid response housing or permanent supportive housing or other permanent types of housing. You see there some of the dates are a little wonky just based on it being July 1st, but that's no matter. This has been in process for a while. The transfer of the public supportive housing, the turnover in new units, that's obviously something that cities can have a role in terms of hopefully being more involved with LAHSA and the county and the state in learning what new properties might be involved in room key or home key process. A lot of us were kept in the dark as to properties being considered for that program or being engaged. I think it'd be helpful if the cities were more involved in that, both to help identify potential properties just based on local economic knowledge, but also if there's collaboration to help the social community politicking of a community taking on the role of providing a room key or a home key location. And then obviously a lot of the cities are also dealing with a lot of new creative housing creation, whether that's ADUs or other type of bifurcation of lots or whatever it might be, or local ordinance, housing ordinance, as the state develops those and imposes those on local cities for good or worse. It does enable cities to provide to LAHSA and other partners what is possible from a housing point of view in each of their cities. So I think that's an important thing to notice. Then at the bottom, you see again the inflow projection, again dealing with newly homeless individuals, both because of COVID economic impact or as we head into wildfire season. You know, there, if we remember Paradise a year and a half ago, hundreds of homeless people in a heartbeat. You know, what type of event could happen that could cause all of us to inherit that type of population. Next slide, please. This is the introduction to the next 6 slides, which is a breakdown of the objectives. So I won't belabor this. We'll just deal with it right away. So next slide, please. This is the unsheltered population. So to the comments by the members, representative City of Torrance, and obviously all of us deal with this. We continue to have, even with the success of room key locally, we continue to deal with obviously what Ashley O has referred to as obviously increasing population of those that are unhoused in our cities. So you see here LAHSA's approach, again, at a very high level as to how they, in partnership with the cities and the COG and the county, propose to deal with the unsheltered population. Really, there's not a great deal of city role in this slide other than any of the cities that are engaged with or are about to engage with, congratulations Torrance, any type of local navigation or outreach personnel from outside agencies or inside staff, because that navigation partnership is really what begins to address the unhoused population in any community. Next slide. So this is the sheltered population. So these are those that are primarily currently residing in room key locations and perhaps in home key locations. So again, no specific role that I foresaw here in terms of cities participating, but if any, we have member cities that have room key locations in their communities. So again, I think being more in partnership with the organizations running room key to help the community information and acceptance of room key extension, because it's probably going to be extended on a calendar basis. I think that's very important for cities to be involved in that more so, because we know our communities and how they react to these at times. Next slide is the housing slide. Next slide, please. There we go, housing, thank you. So this is to deal with going beyond room key and into rapid response housing, as well as public permanent supportive housing. I think there's an odd fragment in the third bullet under the immediate terms, so I sent that feedback on. And I think the city role here is really in the last segment, the longer term actions, the third bullet where it speaks to access to affordable housing units. Cities, whether they are participating in the development of ADUs, or they have sober houses, or they have shared housing in the city, or they run shelter housing, whether it's through Section 8 or other types of programs, whether they are grant funded or otherwise. Cities, may have the opportunity to step up and allocate some of that with a funding agreement through Room Key or Home Key. And then obviously those cities, my city included, that has no type of temporary shelter, emergency housing, public supportive housing, and so forth, making that a conversation with elected officials and city leadership and the community, and seeing if there's any type of consensus towards a goal seeking that in the community. Because ultimately it's, as much as the state, city and county, city of LA and county will do, really it's a city by city solution in terms of identifying property and then making that available to support homeless housing. Next slide. Prevention and diversion. This is really where LAHSA and their providers take over. Cities don't have a great deal of involvement here unless they want to provide funding for this type of thing. And obviously none of us have a lot of fiscal flexibility at the moment based on COVID economic impact. But this is a very important step towards both preparing staff to deal with prevention and diversion for incoming and current people who are unhoused, as well as preparing those folks for the transition through the system from a COVID room key situation to a permanent supportive housing or any type of permanent housing. The next slide is about the strengthening systems. This really needs to be done throughout the process, but really comes if and when room key sunsets, and we're looking at what happens next time, where the mobilization and how successful it was the first time, where hundreds and thousands of people were housed immediately through very creative and strategic thinking. What can be done, and this is really where a lot of city involvement can enhance. The second bullet of the short-term actions, increasing awareness about tenant protections. We've all been following the state's guidelines and the county's guidelines on that, making sure that our communities know about those rules, our landlords, our tenants, so that they are protected mutually, and that neither can fall into a homelessness situation based on unfair treatment or inequitable housing policy. Federal advocacy, obviously all of us, many of us have lobbyists at the federal and state level, making sure they are fighting for as much funding and support as possible as we all deal with the issue of homelessness. Under medium-term actions, obviously this is very much a policy conversation for our elected officials, and it flies in the face of a lot of local sentiment against the state actions about land use, but there are land use and zoning conversations to be had with elected officials in the community about how even built out cities can address providing housing for those who are unhoused. And again, advocacy is repeated there, so that's obviously an ongoing proposition. And then finally, the last bullet regarding long-term disaster planning, the racial equity comes in here, and also to make sure that cities, not necessarily to monitor and prevent, I think it's really more so to monitor and train law enforcement, public safety officials, and city officials and employees, and then ultimately the community, into not stigmatizing homelessness as a crime or a disadvantage on a human equity level. It is a circumstance that people are dealing with on an individual basis. And so putting it in not necessarily a positive light, but a neutral light, as opposed to a negative light, so that it helps the community conversation about helping as opposed to demonizing those folks. I also think that part of that evaluation has to be, and as Ashley went through it, and definitely look at the handout that was provided, how the Measure H funds are allocated, not just now in this kind of condensed, compressed, COVID-influenced budgeting, but there are 6.5 or so years left of Measure H. That's going to come and go really quickly. So what are our goals over the next 5 years for Measure H if we see an economic recovery and it's fully funded again? But what happens post Measure H? And I think that's a city conversation that should be had at the COG level now as well with LASA. So that's my layman's interpretation of this document. Again, conversations or any feedback about the document, please funnel that to COG, Grace and Lori at the COG, so they can pass that on. If you have any questions about what I said, don't ask me because I don't know anymore, but happy to respond to anything anybody wants to say. Thanks, Christian.
Okay. So are there any brief comments that anybody has? And then, as John did mention, if you have questions, we can forward those on to Grace and get back answers to the full body. Okay, seeing none. Thank you so much, John. Did a great job. Okay, so Hallie, let's go on and get an update on PATH.
Hi.
Hi.
There we go. Okay, we can go to next slide. So this is our team, and I wanted to let y'all know that we have 2 exits, unfortunately. So Brittany with the sunglasses on her head, she is a military wife, and they've been stationed someplace else. So she'll be leaving in the next week, and then Linda, the female standing in the back, also moved on to something bigger and better. So we have 2 open positions, and we will be hiring as soon as possible. We have not just had any other delays with hiring in the other areas, so we're hoping that we can get a good candidate soon. Next slide. There you go. So just reminding everybody again to please send your outreach request through lahop.org. It really helps for Harbor Interfaith and PATH to be able to speak and coordinate before the team goes out to make sure that the best person goes out. Again, la-hop.org. Next slide. And here are our city by city breakdowns. Thank you, Torrance, so much. Again, I do want to say that Hermosa Beach, Redondo Beach, and even Gardena do a lot. Their police call us directly rather than putting them in LA Hop. And so what you're seeing are probably community calls, but we do encourage all of you to use LA Hop so our team can be properly dispatched to answer all of your needs. Next slide. Okay, so here are our 1920 outcomes broken up in our districts. As you can see, we did surpass quite a few. We did not meet our permanent housing, as you can see, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that PATH did not have rapid rehousing for about 6 months. We maximized ours, and then we received a loss of reduction. And so what we ended up doing was using a lot of our flex funds for direct placements. So we were able to kind of be creative, but we're really hoping next year that we will get an increase. LASA has said that they will keep the remainder, so we'll be able to maintain those are in it, but we're really hoping for an increase. Also, if you can look at the CES assessments, one of the things that we constantly talk about with not only our supervisors, but Jackie and Grace is how we can best use our time. And the CES assessments have been a goal for 4 years now. And so we are running into a lot of people that already have assessments done. And so with Harbor Interfaith's help, We are sometimes rescoring them if something has happened to see if their score can be higher. But otherwise, we're not going to conduct a CES assessment if it's already been done. And so after 4 years, if you look at what that goal was, it surpasses the amount of people in the city. So we're only doing the assessments for brand new individuals that we are coming in contact. Everyone else is in case management. Next slide. These are all of our success stories. Even with COVID, you can see those with masks on. We were still housing individuals and they were still willing to take the pictures with us. The guy, as you can see with the masks on, the participants have been really kind about keeping distance and learning and educating themselves on all of the symptoms when we're in encampments as well as when we're moving them in. So those are just a few of our success stories. Next slide. So this is how you get in touch with us. One of the main things that I wanted to discuss today is our supervisors' offices have asked PATH to change their scope and philosophy. And so starting today, we will no longer be an outreach team. We are going to be what we're calling basically an intensive case management team. So we will not be canvassing your cities on a regular basis. We will be answering LA HOP calls when they come in, depending on if Harbor Interfaith deploys us, and assessing those individuals for case management. But what PATH is going to do is primarily housing, not proactive outreach in your cities. So we're going to work with Harbor Interfaith on basically a brand new plan as to how PATH will intertwine, but it will be through housing, not necessarily outreach. We're going to continue with the people that are on our caseloads. The caseloads will decrease. We're looking at a 1:25 ratio instead of a 1:50, where our main goal will be housing, not necessarily linkage to supportive services, but housing and then helping them retain their housing. So starting today, we will, again, you're not going to see us as often on your streets, and we will be primarily using the LA HOP portal and working with Harbor Interfaith to see if we go out and if we have the capacity to enter people into our case management. And that is it.
So Hallie, let me ask you, how does that work now with the change? Especially, you said if the focus is going to be more on getting them into housing, but not on wraparound services that correspond with the housing. So then who are you working? Is it Harbor Interfaith? Who are you working with in partnership to ensure they're kind of getting that same full package that they have in the past?
So we will be doing the wraparound services once they retain housing, but it might not be through a subsidy. It might be through flex funds. It might be through rapid rehousing. We're going to access everything. We're not leaving CES. The participants will still be in CES. What's going to be different is that the majority of our day, 6 hours of our day, are on the streets canvassing, looking for individuals and entering them into case management. And mostly what we're going to be doing now is we're going to have a steady case management from the referrals of LA HOP or LASA or Harbor Interfaith, and then moving them into housing. So less time in the van canvassing the streets and more time into housing.
Got it. So will you and Courtney be putting together kind of a summary as to what this means and sending that to each of the cities just so they understand any changes in protocol for what you guys are doing? Or
I believe Grace and Jackie and PATH will be coordinating with that. The
Okay.
supervisor's offices just got the scope of work that they requested yesterday.
Okay.
And so that has to be approved. And so what we're probably going to do is take the next month or two to do some warm handoffs, because it's going to be an impact for our spa. And so we do have to coordinate with Harbor Interfaith to make sure, because PATH was covering a majority of the cities for canvassing. However, the supervisor's offices do not want us to be an outreach team any longer. So we will be speaking with the, well, hopefully Grace and I will work together to speak to the cities, as well as Harbor Interfaith to make a transition plan.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are there any questions for Hallie?
I have a question.
Okay, Alex, go ahead.
Well, did the county give you any reason why they don't want you guys to do more outreach, outside? Because that is where primarily you're going to get your homeless into housing, by outreach to those people that are on the street, and how that's going to impact, from our cities. If the cities don't have a program that does outreach to go on the street and talk to those homeless and try to get them into service or to housing.
Yeah, I believe that our supervisors' offices believe that there is already a lot of outreach. This has been the second year that they have demanded that we change. And so the compromise was that we could still answer LA HOPS because they did not want us doing that. So I believe with the supervisors, and I can't speak for them, but the fact that we have an E6 team, we have LASA and outreach and housing navigation through LASA, they did not think that they needed another outreach team. We advocated very strongly to keep it outreach, but again, our compromise was just that we would help Harbor Interfaith answer the LA HOPS. Again, I think that we, when we finally, COVID has stopped, prevented us from actually meeting and doing a lot of things right now. But when Harbor Interfaith and PATH can get together, it might be a very slow transition because we don't want to abandon any cities and not have them covered with outreach. And if cities are dependent on PATH, then we will do a very slow exit into the housing team.
Follow-up question: Is there a possibility that all the South Bay cities can send letters to ask the LA County to maintain the outreach, or is too late?
Great. That would be a Grace and a contract question. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Alex, I think that would also probably be something maybe we talk about at our next steering committee meeting and our board meeting. So let Olivia weigh in on that if she wants to, but we can have a further update and discussion about that with Grace as a body.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Christian.
Sure. Jesse, I saw you unmute yourself. Did you have a question or no?
I did have a question. Thank you, Haley, for presenting. I have two follow-up questions on these slides. For the referrals, does that count for linkages as well? And when intensive case management programming does start, what is the caseload looking like for each case manager?
So the referral slide is for actual connections. I think that we follow LASA's rule with services that once you have the service that is connected, as in the person has the intake or has a case manager, or you actually dropped the person off at the referral place. So those are referrals attained. And the caseload with the housing case managers will be 25, 1 to 25. We decided that the retention case managers, which we're hoping will just be 2, will most likely be at a 1 to 40, 1 to 45. Maybe it's a little bit higher, hoping that they can see as we house more people, they can take on more people to retain.
Okay, you're good, Jesse? Okay, any other questions? All right, well, seeing none, thank you, Hallie. Appreciate your time as always, and we'll move on to Brianna, who may also be able to kind of talk a little bit more about outreach, since that is one of Harbor Interfaith's purviews, and maybe you can talk about if that has also come down to you guys as part of filling in the gaps for removing that as part of PATH's services.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brianna Jajaram. I'm the regional coordinator for the Adult Coordinated Entry System here in SPA 8 from Harbor Interfaith Services. And just to kind of chat real quick about what Haley mentioned, we haven't had a moment to speak yet. It's been pretty busy, so we will coordinate, as Haley said, and to ensure that all of the other outreach teams that are available to us in SPA 8 are able to pick up some of the proactive outreach. Of course, those types of things are discussed in our care coordination meetings, and currently we meet with our outreach teams spa-wide once a week via Zoom. So, and then each week we rotate with which hubs. So we have a Northern hub, a Beach Cities hub, and a Harbor hub. And the last half of each of those meetings is dedicated to one of the hubs, so we can talk specifically about what's going on in those geographic regions. So yeah, outreach in the time of COVID has been very interesting, to say the least, just in terms of maintaining social distancing, making sure our clients have PPE, getting folks to the available resources. So more to come on that, but as Haley mentioned, we do have the E6 multidisciplinary teams, which are through Mental Health America, that are spa-wide. Our LASA HET and host teams are spa-wide. And then we have, specific to the Beach Cities, the Harbor Interfaith Beach Cities team. And then we've got some outreach housing navigation in the Northern hub with St. Margaret's Center through a subcontract with Harbor Interfaith. And so I think, you know, knowing that change is inevitable, I think it's just going to be taking a look at the available resources we have and restructuring them to ensure that we have spa-wide coverage. That is something, as the SPA 8 lead, that we are committed to doing, is ensuring that there is equal access and equal coverage throughout the spa. So knowing what I know now, we'll absolutely have a conversation, and you know, I'd be happy to present on kind of what the changes were and are in our next COG meeting as part of my updates. I'm happy to do that. And if folks have questions in the meantime, our SPA 8 regional outreach coordinator is Jasmine Johnson. And her efforts right now have been focused on getting the ABH sites, the Bridge Home sites in San Pedro and Wilmington, getting those lists taken care of. And then, so I've been supporting in the background with some of the other outreach coordination pieces. So we're working as a team, we're making it work. Again, there's always a lot of moving parts, but I'm happy to provide an update the next time we meet. So that being said, I have a few updates just from the SPA level as it relates to CES. As mentioned in the last COG meeting, we are a project room, Harbor Interfaith Services is a project room key provider in the South Bay at the Lomita site, and we continue to operate that location. It's been in operation since April 8th. And we currently have 59 individuals enrolled with 2 intakes coming tomorrow. And again, project room key sites, for those of you who may be unfamiliar, are specific to those who are at high risk for COVID-19 contractions, so 65 and older, or those who are not necessarily 65 and older who have pre-existing health conditions that cause them to be at greater risk for contracting COVID-19. And so if we conduct with our nursing staff on site who are there 12 hours a day, we conduct breakfast, lunch, and dinner symptom checks. So checking temperatures, asking the questions about the other symptoms that go along with COVID. 3 meals a day are provided. The clients have a refrigerator and a microwave in their room, both of which are all they need to eat the meals that are provided. And then they are allowed to leave for essential things such as doctor's appointments, if they have special dietary things that they'd like to pick up, medications, things like that. The curfew we try to stick to is 7 p.m. So that we can ensure that the nursing staff are the ones checking for symptoms before folks are going back into their rooms. So it's been going really well. And now what recently we've been working on, because we've had a lot of folks there for a little while, is housing plans. And so we're consistently having those conversations, working with LASA to get folks connected to the DMV, DPSS, Department of Public Social Services benefits such as General Relief, CalFresh, Medi-Cal. We have Department of Mental Health on site 2 times a week for clients to speak with. And I wasn't sure how that would go, but clients have been really engaged with DMH when they've been on site. So that's been a really positive piece of the services that we've been able to provide there. be happy to answer any questions that folks have about Project Roomkey. The next update that I have is about the Bridge Home sites that are opening next Tuesday, July 7th. As I said, it's a very busy time of year, but we have Harbor Interfaith Services is the provider for our San Pedro Bridge Home site. That's opening on Tuesday, July 7th, and US Vets is the provider for the Wilmington Bridge Home site that's also opening on July 7th, both of which are 100 beds specific to the geographic region within Council District 15 for the city of LA. And so our outreach teams have been, who service those areas, have been working with the outreach coordination team here at Harbor Interfaith to ensure that we have folks ready to go. We have lists of folks. We have over 100 people on the interest list for both sites. So we know we're going to be able to fill these beds really quickly. I haven't had the opportunity to see the Wilmington site yet, but I have seen the San Pedro site, and it is beautiful. We're very excited to be able to offer this resource to folks here in Spot 8, where historically we've not had a ton of access to shelter. So between our Project Roomkey sites, our Bridge Home sites, and then the other San Pedro interim housing sites, we've seen a lot of additional interim housing resources come online for individuals who are looking to get off the street. So yeah, move-ins begin the 7th. We're looking to bring in at least 8 clients a day to fill the shelter, particularly at the San Pedro site. I can speak more to the operations of that one, 8 per day, looking to fill that shelter within a month at the most. So working with our team to ensure that intakes are taking place in a staggered schedule. We're super, like I said, super excited about the opportunity to have these opportunities and placements for the folks that we work with. One thing I can say based on my experience with Project Roomkey is that having a stable place to stay makes it so much easier to do the hard work of locating housing. We've seen a lot of success. We've had at least 8 move-outs to permanent housing so far at Project Roomkey, and we've got many more matched and enrolled in various programs. So we can't say enough about our partners, both as agencies and at the city level as well, to make this happen. So other than that, all of the other programs have continued to operate business as usual. I think the only one that's changed slightly is prevention, homelessness prevention, only because there's all of the moratoriums on evictions and learning all about that. So we've been working really closely with our legal aid partners to ensure that those who need those services get the appropriate referrals and they know what their rights are as tenants. So that I would say would be the major one. We too have continued to house folks through rapid rehousing. Just got a text that one of our folks signed in our some paperwork for the housing authority today. So, you know, good things are still happening. They're just happening. We've had to learn how to adapt in a very different time. But as Haley said, with PATH, we've had very similar experience, and yeah, nothing's really slowed down. It's just been really, really interesting and a lot of fun. So at this point, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Otherwise, as I said, I'll come back next time we meet with information about the updated outreach strategy in Spot 8 as it relates to proactive outreach.
Okay, any questions for Brianna? All right, seeing none, thank you so much. I appreciate your time as always.
Thank you.
All right, Grace, we've got legislative update here. Did you have something in mind? Did you want to go to Janet or Cody or any of them, or was there something specific that you wanted to address?
I did not have anything specific. I just, as a request from Janet, she had asked that we put this on the agenda on a regular basis. So I don't know if Janet or Jeanette or Cody or Moises have any updates that they would like to share.
Okay, well, Janet, since you are visually there right now, why don't you tell us if there's anything from the Congressman's office that you wanted to share? But we're not hearing you. I see you're unmuted, but I don't know if your microphone's just not working. No, still not working.
Is that any better?
There you go. You
Oh,
figured it out. All
it
right.
helps to put the volume up. So the congressman has either introduced, supported, or co-sponsored over 10 bills that would provide cities with funding for various aspects of addressing homelessness. And even though people are working remotely, they continue to push diligently on some of those bills, especially with the knowledge that the economic results of COVID could mean we have a lot more homeless people. So continuing to push forward on those pieces of legislation, but no news yet.
Okay, great. Cody or Jeanette, did you guys have anything? All right, not hearing anything, so we will move on. Okay, Grace, update of the COGS Homeless Service Coordination.
Okay, well, Ashley did share some of the information in that we are in the process of finalizing what we're doing with the innovation funds. We do have funding that's going to be going to the city of Torrance to help develop their homelessness plan. We also have funding going to the city of Redondo Beach for their emergency enhanced response. Oh, I'm blowing it. Well, that project. Christian, help me. I don't have it in front of me. Well, anyway, the project dealing with the prosecutor's office. And then we're also looking at, as Ashley mentioned, reviewing all of our city's ordinances related to emergency shelter, to potentially look to see if there's anything that we can kind of push forward in our cities. We're also working on finalizing with Silvernest, our home sharing program, and we're really excited about that. And we're really looking for those individuals before, this is a prevention strategy, so before they fall into homelessness, and matching them up with somebody who is a homeowner who may be having a difficult time either keeping their home or may need some additional services. And then we're also reviewing safe parking, because we are the only spa that does not have a safe parking program. So we are going to be reaching back out to our cities to see if this is something that we can push forward. We do have some funding available that we can actually do a pilot project for safe parking in one of our South Bay cities. And then we are also, we've developed we're looking at client aid or flex funds, and we've reached out to our service providers to try to figure out where some of their funding is not allowed to go. And so especially with individuals who prior to a housing interview or a job interview, they may need to stay in a motel room for 1 to 3 nights. So we're trying to work with that, and then also work with our cities and service providers for money that could be available for first or last month's rent or a security deposit. So we're getting all the particulars worked out on all of that. And then also we did have some additional funding for hygiene services. And so we had 5 of our cities that took advantage of the funding. And that was, we had Gardena, Hawthorne, Inglewood, Redondo Beach, and Torrance. And in both Hawthorne and Torrance, they were able to have hand washing stations that were available. And then our other cities were purchasing hygiene kits to be available for for folks in those cities that are experiencing homelessness. So, and then we've also, what's kind of exciting is with Lori Jacobs, well, she actually took the lead on this. We were looking to see if we could fund a pilot project to empty RV tanks. And so we have partnered with one of the portable service companies, and they are going to provide vouchers for us between July and December, and where we may be able to go to a location where there are a number of RVs that where people experiencing homelessness may be living in those RVs, and then have this service provided for them. So we're still working out all the particulars on that, but we're excited about that moving forward. And then I think that's it from my end. Lori, did you have anything to add?
You covered it all.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Grace. Are there any questions for Grace? All right. Well, seeing none then. Next steps and follow-up actions. Grace, do you have anything for that or no?
I don't at this point, but does anyone have anything that we need to be working on before our next meeting, which will be in September?
No, I think just a handful of the things that were mentioned earlier today. If again, just maybe send out a reminder to people for how they can comment on the Measure H draft recommendations, and also just send them Ashley's information just in case they have follow-up questions for her in that department.
Yes, I did add Ashley's email address into the chat box. It is there. Okay. But, and then also all of the presentations are, I think I mentioned earlier, or may have mentioned earlier, are uploaded onto the COG Homeless Services Task Force webpage. And one additional document that is up there is data that our coalition, South Bay Coalition to End Homelessness, put together and presented at their meeting last Wednesday. And so that has some specific trends and some numbers related to the homeless count in our service planning area. Because Nancy couldn't be with us today, but she did get me that information. And so that is also posted on our webpage.
Okay. And then I would just say to the electeds on the call, again, you know, talk with Grace and keep your eyes and ears out for any potential safe parking locations in Spot 8, as well as potential possibilities for permanent supportive housing, bridge housing, anything that really helps us, especially get individuals off the streets sooner than later, and maybe even helps, you know, with the PRK sites that are winding down. So. With that said, we will adjourn until September 2nd. Thank you everybody for joining us today. I appreciate you taking time out of your day, and we'll see you in a couple months. Stay safe.
Happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July as well.
Thank you, everybody. Good meeting. Thank you so much for the information.
Thank you for coming, Paulette.